15 years of doing this work, and alhamdulillah, the numbers stay the same. So we can start whenever. Yeah. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. The reason can you guys hear me? Okay. I have to make sure I'm not covering the mic here. So the reason I wanted to do this presentation is that the latest research that's coming out is very alarming. That suicide rates are double in Muslim youth in comparison to other religions. So it is a very concerning moment for us as a community. But also what we are seeing is an increase in incidences of homicide, suicide. So we are seeing that one person getting to that point of no return, hopelessness, frustration, hurting themselves and then hurting the rest of the family. Those incidences have really jumped up in the community. So I think we, alhamdulillah, have a lot of resources. We have a lot of protective factors, but until unless we talk about it, we won't be utilizing them. We won't be accessing care. Another piece that's really concerning, and that's where this topic comes in, and that's where I'm starting this campaign is Avail to Prevail. It means use to preserve. And what we are finding out that even with the mental health, the resources that are out there, the rate of utilization of those resources is 3 times less in our communities than other communities. So on one hand, you are seeing the vulnerability go up, but on the other hand, we are seeing that because of the stigma, the barriers that we have, that we are not utilizing care, we are not accessing care, until unless we end up with really bad consequences. And alhamdulillah, this was one of the busiest time of the year for me, but I did not want it to miss to reach out to you all because September is Suicide Awareness Month. Okay. So, no, that's fine. And this is being recorded, right? Can be. So today, although all the major mental health concerns are at same rate prevalent in Muslim communities as well, but depression, anxiety, substance abuse. But another research that I was part of is out of Dearborn that was really worrying and concerning is on the opiate use. There also we see that the Muslim youth are using, abusing, overdosing on opiates higher than other faith groups. Also, the other research coming out, like Pew Research and other, are saying Muslim youth are the least thriving, are the most angry. So it is a moment of concern. I think we as a community have to hit the pause button, take in account what do we want from our kids? How do we define success for them? Is it only going to be a GPA? They're getting into a medical school. They're getting into a bigger car or bigger house, or we have to start thinking in the realm of mental wellness and resilience. Are our kids okay? Are they doing okay? I think it is so very important to change that. So we know mental health has become a public health crisis of our time. Even before COVID, we were very worried about it. We were on edge because of shrinking resources and increasing needs. But right now with COVID, the vulnerability has gone up in terms of emotional toll that COVID has done, financial toll, in fact, and overall burden. Our everyday burden of life has increased, and not only in United States. I was looking at the numbers that 80 million refugees, just because of COVID, 80 million people had to move and leave their homes. So I'm working with the refugee population as well. So it's very interesting that we always create a silo around mental health. We say we will have to take out time to talk about mental health, or mental illnesses are separate, but we don't realize that. Just think of this. You all came for namaz today, alhamdulillah. Why did you come to the namaz? Because mentally you were doing well, you were feeling well, you felt the need to come and do something. So human behavior is very much controlled by the thought process and how we feel. So until unless you're doing well, your whole attitude and behavior gets impacted. So it's not just one thing that, oh, I'm depressed. It is what you are doing in your life, how you are praying, who are you connecting with, or how are you doing academically, how are your relationships. Everything starts with your mental wellness. So that's why it is important that we bring mental health as a central, not on the periphery of what we do. And we know that mental health now, after COVID, we are almost at the precipice. Whole nation is now, right now, from White House to local bodies, everybody is talking about how do we contain this crisis. There is a severe shortage of mental health providers, but also individually, we need to start the work with individuals. And that's where Islam is the most brilliant religion to not only understand mental health, but I would say Islam starts with mental health, starts with your mental competency. And we will talk about that. But a small ayah, so it's so practical way that Islam has dealt with mental health. Frequently you would see verses talking about acknowledging human vulnerability, human emotions, depression, anxiety, even the prophets. We see the verses talking about, even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you see is being addressed and saying, don't huzn, or don't take so much grief that you would kill yourself. We see that in various verses, wal asre innal insana lafi khusran. Like you start with the deficit. Quran is acknowledging that. Unfortunately, when we say human beings are in a loss, we don't take it into emotional perspective. That it's also talking about that you will start with the deficit model, but then find healing in Quran, find healing in prayers, find healing in community. So it's amazing that right now, isolation is our biggest crisis. Even if we talk about societal isolation, individual isolation has become the biggest crisis of our times. And Islam already said that start with your wellness, continue with welfare, but bring it all back to the community. And that's why, even though numbers never increased, Tassin Bhai only, may God give him long life, few supporters that are here, I still struggle to get my message across to the community. That's why this is so important that this work starts here in the community. So I know Islam puts a lot of value on preservation of life. But Islam is also a very practical religion that takes in account your intention before action. Your intention, your emotional well-being, your emotional state, and then your action. So it's all a series. You are not just condemned on an action that you might have taken out of absolute, uncontrollable, unbearable pain. So we will come back to action. We are not saying that it is okay, because preservation of life is anyhow important. But we are also saying don't be judgmental. There are anecdotes that in times of Prophet, there were two incidents that are narrated and reported. One was of a soldier who, after fighting a war, got seriously wounded, and out of sheer hopelessness, he took his life. And Prophet condemned that. So don't take your life out of sheer hopelessness, that I won't be saved or God cannot heal me anymore. If you are doing it like that, that's condemned. That's what's prohibited. But then there is a Prophet's circle, there is one person who was considered majnoon, mentally incompetent, probably suffering from mental illnesses, and in his state, mental illness, he cuts his wrist and dies. But then Sahaba sees him smiling and being happy in heaven, and they come to but the point that Prophet said, that pray for his janazah, like the thought we have that if somebody has completed suicide, you are not supposed to say their janazah. That's not really true. So Prophet said, go pray for the soul. But also when Sahaba came to him and said, we saw him smiling, Prophet smiled too, that God knows best. And that's what we are saying, that in no way are you encouraged. Every point of the Quran is asking you to intervene and refocus, reframe, and find help, take care of your health. But also don't be judgmental, because suicide does not impact just the person, it impacts the families, it impacts the communities left behind. So if we are going to be judgmental, you are putting them deeper into that grave that the one person, because of his whatever situation, mental illness, whatever thing made him took his life, and may God forgive those souls. It doesn't end there, and we as a community have to be compassionate. We cannot be judgmental. We cannot be the one passing comments and not being supportive. So this is why this is so important. This work has become so important, that we have the resources. Yes, God is healing, Islam is healing, but it's still, if it's an illness, it's like me saying, why should we have diabetes in the community? If we are praying 5 times, if we are so disciplined, if we have supportive families, then we should not have diabetes. Why should we have cancer? And people who are pious, who are 5 times, I lost my brother to cancer, and I look at his life, and a virtual, honest, person of integrity, but that does not mean he's not going to get sick or die. We know that Prophet got sick and passed away like any other mortal. So we have to walk away from this when it comes to mental illnesses, that if you are praying, then you should not be depressed. If you are praying, then you should not be thinking about taking your life. If you are praying, then you should just are automatically somehow protected. We know that we as our community are under a lot of stress. Our kids are being bullied at twice the national rate. 60–70% students right now are saying that they or someone they know have been bullied. Muslim youth are under a lot of stress right now. We know data keeps coming out of surveillances, of doctors now being recruited to report on kids who are coming in for mental health treatment because they are being considered vulnerable and as a national threat. So yes, we are under a lot of pressure that way. Discrimination but another important piece that the research is saying that we as a community are failing our youth. And me when I was working as a psychiatrist at Michigan State, the biggest concern that the Muslim kids would bring to me is, how can I talk to my parents about it? How do I make them understand what I'm going through? And to me, that's concerning. But I've also seen incidences where the families would beg me not to mention anything in Islamic Center because they don't want to lose face in front of the community. Your religion can be very protective, but how we are practicing it as a community. Are we practicing a religion of compassion, inclusiveness, support, or are we being constantly comparing each other? Who's a better Muslim? Who is doing what? How much? Who is successful? Are we coming to Jummah prayers to really check on each other? What was the purpose of coming together and praying? Was to check on each other, stay connected, don't isolate. But what are we, if we are going to come here to talk bad about each other, to compare with each other, to find faults with each other, then the purpose of the community is failing. And we as a mental health community, we are failing. The biggest barrier to your care is community becomes the biggest barrier. So two models that we see are prevalent in our community as well. One is the model of shame and other is the model of guilt. Shame, what would they say? If I talk about my daughter, my son struggling, what would the community think of me as a parent? So easy for me to come in and say, hey, my daughter got into medical school and got the scholarship because that make me feel like a good parent, without thinking that she still might be struggling with depression, anxiety, or whatever she has had to do to get to that point. But I also talk about what about the kids who are born with challenges, developmental delays, autism, ADHD, are not making ahead in academic settings for no fault of theirs. Are they not responsibility of the community? Are they not our kids? But we have to really hit the pause button and think about it, because until unless we change the culture that's prevalent in our societies, we won't be able to save our kids. Very scary numbers, and they keep spiraling, they keep increasing. When I heard this, that in United States currently 1 in 2 doctors complete suicide every day. 1 to 2 doctors, that's 400 physicians die by suicide every year. If that was the point of success, that somebody has reached that professional level, why are they doing it? And believe me, it doesn't, if you can look up the numbers, it's not that, oh, they must not be Muslims or they are not praying. When I say those numbers, that does include Muslims. So something is not working. Even right now, I was looking at the rate with the students, medical students. high rate of burnout, depression, anxiety, suicide. If I look into other professions, same numbers. So why, if we are gaining worldly success, why are we not contented? Why are we not satisfied? Right now, when I say 1 in 4 Americans are struggling, in this room, 1 in 4 people might be depressed, not acknowledging it, not taking care of their disease, or not out of shame, not accessing care. So those are the strict, scary numbers. We also know that family, culture also play a role. But the three things that we see commonly with people who do attempt is sense of isolation. This isolation could be real, or this isolation could be perceived. That even if I'm sitting in my family, in my community, nobody understands me, nobody gets me, I feel alone. So this isolation doesn't necessarily mean you are physically isolated. You can be emotionally isolated. You can feel not connected to the community. Sense of hopelessness, like there's no future, no tomorrow. Self-hatred. And I tell you, we as families, as friends, as community, very much are responsible for making people hate themselves. Because we set up very high expectations, ideals. We as a society, we don't allow room to falter. Have you seen the prophets? Look who the prophets would make friends with. Who would they go and sit with? Always the broken. When Quran and Hadith tells us that even Imam who was drinking alcohol was allowed and accommodated and forgiven by Prophet. When we hear about a woman of bad profession being forgiven by Allah just for giving water to a thirsty dog. And just recently I was reading somewhere the concept that imagine, do not think why she was forgiven, but also think that God sent that thirsty dog in her way because God wanted to forgive her, give her a chance for her to ask for forgiveness. But when it comes to us, human to human, we become judgmental. We are always standing at that high point that I am a better Muslim. You are not praying right. You are not covering your head. Women are coming here, men. I mean, we just go to the frivolous. We are not going to the spirit of compassion that Islam is. And that's where people start internalizing this shame, which turns into self-hatred. And when the self-hatred gets to a point, it either expresses in self-harm or harm to others. It's a very interesting concept in Islam that yes, the responsibility ultimately is with the individual, but the way it has been connected to the community, that it does become a communal responsibility as well. That's when we trace the history of mental health, we find out that the actual work of mental health and wellness, what we think of Western psychiatry and psychology, was done by Muslim scholars like Avicenna. And first mental hospital built in Iraq, and not built outside of like city out of shame, built in the center of the city. Why? Because that individual who is suffering became the responsibility of the whole community. Nobody was turning their face away, turning their face towards the one in need. Islam puts so much importance on preservation of life that if you have helped save someone, you have saved humanity. Even today I was reading, yes, you will be accountable for your namaz, for your salah, Ramadan, and fasting and charity. But the most important piece is how are you treating people around you? What act of kindness are you doing? And I think mental health has become the jihad of our times. We really all have to participate and save these lives of our loved ones, of our youth. Suicide is the act of taking one's own life. Suicidal behavior refers to either talking about it, taking actions related to ending one's own life. Suicidal ideations could be just thoughts, not really acting on it, but wanting to act on it, wanting to not be there. And why does this happen? Because these people start feeling like a burden. They feel like I'm a burden. I'm bringing my family down. I'm a source of shame. There's a lot of guilt, a lot of self-hatred that comes into that. So this is important. Unfortunately, there's no way we can predict who's gonna act, who's gonna attempt, who's gonna do a serious attempt. But only thing we know, sudden changes of behavior are the red flags. Sudden changes of behavior means somebody might have been feeling depressed for a long time, not coming out, not showing up, suddenly starts coming out, talking to people, giving away things, say, calling long lost relatives and saying, hey, I want to come visit. Why this sudden change of behavior? Because they have decided they are not gonna live in this much pain anymore. Those are very meditated suicide attempts. And I'm going to separate it. Then there are suicide attempts that are very impulsive, done in a sheer moment of time, that I can't take this anymore, kind of. And you can have, you can share the slides. It would be saved here. So where do we see these impulsive acts in more younger population? Divorce, breaking of a relationship, failing of an exam, feeling insulted, humiliated, feeling hopeless for any reason, impulsively acting, not thinking through. But what we know from suicide prevention models, that even those who impulsively do it or premeditated, planned suicide attempts, till the last minute they are hoping to be saved. And the last 15 to 20 seconds are crucial. If some intervention happens at that time, that's why it's so important to be aware of the resources, to kind of break through before they walk through the act, kind of how can we break through the cycle is what is important. So impulsive usually share acute loss, trauma, some kind of big pain situation that people feel like I can't take this anymore. Now, I'm not a religious scholar, and people would say different narratives are present, but there is a narrative that Prophet, when we say went through a whole year of sadness after losing his wife, and then was having, like, there was a gap between him not receiving any more, like Jibril was not coming. Revelation, sorry. Revelation, I run out of my English by end of the day. So Revelation, there was a gap, time period that the revelations were not coming, that he got into that hopeless mode and went and was standing on edge of a mountain when the verse came to stop him. So there would be people who would say, no, it's not possible for Prophet to get to that point. But I also feel that Prophet was given every possible human challenge. from poverty to not like losing his parents, his loved ones, wife, and dying like a mortal because of illness. So all the struggles were given to him, and that's why I feel he was also tried by emotional struggles, depression, anxiety. And that's what the Quran says, that how one person can endure so much pain but still can prevail and in faith. And that's how you get to the higher level of faith. So impulsive or premeditated we see in older population because of chronic stressors, disease usually, chronic diseases, being abused, being in an abusive relationship, all that. So it's a very pre-planned kind of attempt. Like we see, they would go buy gun or try to hang themselves or overdose. So it's a very thought out thing. And again, if 15, 20 seconds are the crucial time, if somebody can intervene or if they get that insight into calling these numbers, now that the numbers have been created, or calling a loved one, is what we see is the protective thing. And I feel that faith communities are the natural setting. And I have used this Islamic Center with my students who were having thoughts of hurting themselves. I have told them to come here, sit here, and meditate. Sometimes if I can come, I would come and sit with them, or I would have them come here and sit and meditate. So this is a big resource we have, but we are not utilizing it. How can we cultivate this more is what my hope is. How can we bring Islamic centers? And we see successful models of this, especially Adam Center, DC, Imam Majid. A lot of imams are now working on it, but if you go to Adam Center now has a wellness center, first counseling center built along with the mosque, where the people coming to the Islamic Center are referred to this counseling center. And that is my hope, that we can, inshallah, do something like that here. So again, we know that Sharia says this, that preservation of life is very important, but it also says preservation of intellect is important, akal is important. You being mentally competent is the central tenet of Islam. Because you are not Muslim just because you were born Muslim, you are Muslim because you think, you believe, you say, you act. It's a whole package of what being Muslim means. But we also see that in preservation of this intellect, anything that can take away the clarity is prohibited. Be it addiction, be it extreme pleasure seeking, be it anger, anything intense and extreme was prohibited, because anything that takes away your mental clarity. In the end, how do we talk to people who are depressed, sad? One thing that doesn't help is you coming and saying, what is wrong with you guys? You have all the resources. We were the ones struggling. When we came, we were doing 2 jobs. We had to take exams. You have so much resources, comfort. Why are you depressed? Never say what is wrong with you, but what wrong happened. Why are you feeling that way? How can I walk with you? How can I be with you? How can I support you in this process? That's empathy. Empathy is literally standing in their shoes. I'm going to wrap up. Yeah.
لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Let's say a prayer for all those who are struggling, all those whose loved ones are struggling with mental health concerns, illnesses, and so continuing. So empathy means literally standing in their shoes. Empower is so, especially now when your kids come home, your daughters come home and are talking about discrimination, of bullying, or even are talking about feelings for someone, or peer pressure, or the struggles they are facing. Just validate it. Just validate it. Because if you are not going to listen to them, then somebody else would. If you want them to come to the right path and to be there, follow the right path, it's important you be their source of strength, you be their safe space. Engaging and these treatment. You wouldn't walk around with a broken arm. You wouldn't walk around with a broken leg. Why do you want people to walk around with a broken mind? So treatment, and I'm gonna go through the resources here. Please use these resources, especially 988 is a new hotline, crisis hotline. You can text to this number, you can call this number, and they will connect you. First, they will talk you through the crisis that you're having, but then they will connect you to the resources as well. There's a whole list here of numbers that you can call. We can maybe create a chart and put it around in the Islamic Center. I don't know if I've added addiction in this, but I can always find you resources for substance abuse treatment as well. I know, hard topic, and just wanted to still use this month to come and talk to you all. And please continue to be an ally, friend, safe space for those struggling with mental illnesses. I love the quote that don't be just a bystander, be an upstander. Okay? No health without mental health. And again, I would repeat, Avail to Prevail. There are resources. Find treatment, find resources. Thank you. Do you have questions? Anyone has questions? Sure. Yeah. Look, even when you are practicing Islam, moderation is important, right? So there was a time that the hadith came that pray during the night, even after the first namaz. It's like it's good to get up and pray in middle of the night. So what happened? Sahaba started praying the whole night and started neglecting their home duties, their relationships, their other work started getting affected. And that's where the hadith came that find moderation, right? There, you maybe what your family feels, that what you think is when you are feeling happy, but might be a time, and I've seen that people, some mental illnesses, if you don't have regular sleep hours, your mental health can get worse. And I've seen that, especially in month of Ramadan, when people are praying and waking up at odd times, eating at odd times, that the cycle, the circadian cycle gets impacted, and you can have a relapse of depression or mania. So I think that might be what they are concerned about, that when they see you not sleeping or waking up maybe in extra hours and praying extra, that they feel that you are kind of disconnecting from your other real, like I shouldn't say real, but reality, your responsibilities, your relationships. So I think that is what might be a symptom in your case, that it might be indicative that you are getting into an episode of depression or mania. Moderation is very important, and I had a slide here. This slide is very important. Regular sleep hours, eating healthy, exercising, everything in moderation. Really, Islam, if one thing is prohibited in Islam, is anything extreme. Everything has to be done in moderation. So I think finding that balance. So it's not that they are against faith, or praying in itself can be healing, but it also, there is a discipline that Salah brings to your life. So even in Islam, anything that starts, even fasting, why was it people were excluded from fasting if you were not well? And that includes mental illnesses as well. Yes. Excessive. It is called scrupulosity. Scrupulosity. So one thing is following Deen and praying. One thing is scrupulous, like you become very like, oh, I have to pray. I have to do taswees, 100 taswees. And that might not be healing. That in itself could be symptom of a disease, right? Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes we start praying out of guilt, and maybe you start feeling excessively guilty about something, excessively sad, and you start praying more than usual, and that's how they think that your condition is getting worse. Not change in behavior, like all of us go through changes in behavior. Like today it's cloudy, rainy. Some people will say, oh, how nice, romantic. Some people will say, oh my God, winter is coming. It makes me depressed, right? I'm not talking about this change, and I wish I had a paper and pencil. Certain changes are natural, right? People do get sad, then we are okay. We get happy, we are okay. Not those changes are concerning. Changes which are like 180 degrees different. Somebody who was crying, not eating, suddenly is elated, happy, giving away things. Those sudden changes, but it's easy said than hard to predict, right? Otherwise, we would have stopped all the suicides that were happening if it was so easy to predict. But that's something we assume that people get very depressed just before they attempt or try to complete suicide. But what we know, like comedian Robin Williams, so he got diagnosis of a neurological disease, and he was very happy, successful, was laughing, had dinner, but then went and killed himself, right? There's another designer that maybe 2 weeks after Robin Williams did the same thing. Or Anthony Bourdain, the successful chef from CNN, he was on top of his career, but he was chronically struggling with this chronic pain. So he was happy and suddenly exuberant, enjoying, and then he went in. So people were confused. So that's why I'm saying that not necessarily they become very depressed. Sometimes it is that they become depressed, but sometimes once they have decided that they are going to do something, somebody who had been depressed or struggling might suddenly start acting very opposite to what they were acting. And people think like, oh, they are doing better, but unfortunately, it is because they have decided to do this. Yeah, you can say like a spike again. But I think I'm not saying like just mood changes that we all go through, but like 180-degree change. And another thing is they start giving away things or would say, hey, I owe you money. I'm here to return the money. So, I mean, those are behaviors like when people went and looked at Anthony Bourdain's last few shows, all his shows, he's talking about after death and afterlife and spirituality and what happens. So he's making comments about that. But it's all hindsight. Unfortunately, yes. Only thing we can do is prevent rather than predict. I think our model is on prevention. And prevention is how can we engage these people? How can we empathize, engage, and encourage them to go to treatment? But isolation, breaking these negative thoughts are very important. And that's where I think being in community and the community role becomes very important. Any other question? Yes? Intergenerational tension. how do I address that? I want to address it ahead rather than afterwards when the crises have happened. So usually, unfortunately, when we see that first they would go to somebody in the community or imam, then go to family practitioner, then psychiatrists are engaged in a crisis moment, right? So usually at that point, I feel the parents are a bit open to listen, right? But ideal world, what your generation can do is once you become accountable for your mental wellness. So first of all, think of this way that discussions cannot happen in heat of the moment. We try and convey our point when already the conflict has happened, right? You are fighting, you are arguing, and then you are trying to convince them. So in therapy, we say for a child that catch them doing good. When they are happy, when they are playing is the time that you can teach a child more than when they are anxious. I say same thing for your parents, that use the moments that you are as a family maybe enjoying, happy, sitting, then bring up the conversation in terms of wellness. Like, mom, these things stress me, these things help me. How can we have a better conversation around that? But I think right now, the way numbers are spiraling in our own communities, I feel that parents are more open. I still feel that the community has to become more, like I constantly bother Imam Sohail Chaudhry to use Friday khutbas to normalize. Like one thing that still bothers me, we have du'as for people going through surgeries or treatment. We never have du'as. I mean, we don't have to announce the names, but we can say, make a dua for people struggling with mental health issues, right? So right now, I think this is the biggest important piece we have is the pulpit, the power of pulpit. I think we absolutely need to use that. But again, it's not one moment conversation that you should have with your parents. It's a consistent small conversations that need to happen, but not in moment of crisis or conflict. A moment when you are all coming together as a family, maybe driving, maybe traveling, something like that. दूसरी बातें भी तो मनवाते होंगे ना, कैसे मनवाते हैं? Give them my number. That's all I can say. Have them call me. Yeah, no, that is our biggest challenge is how do we bridge this intergenerational gap? How do we have meaningful conversations across it? So very important.
For the average people here, how do you advise somebody? You can't tell something on the word of that or going to be church, but you have to see the finding.
I think you can.
So what kind of advice do you give to disciples, like for example, exercising the 7 pounders? So that can help.
So I didn't add that, but if you are noticing somebody is acting stressed out or in peculiar way or unusual behavior, or even let's talk about negative. Somebody you find out is drinking more or hanging out late at night outside the family or isolating or not showing up for classes or having conflicts with spouse or parents, anything you find out, why do we have to wait till they get to that point? I think we as a community should reach out and say, hey, you doing okay? You want to sit? Let's talk. You don't have to go directly to the topic that's bothering them, but just how do you establish yourself as the safe space? as an ally is that rapport, that trust has to be built. I think that's the biggest thing we can do. That's how right now, alhamdulillah, so many kids in the community know that I'm the safe space. They would call me, reach out to me, or how do they know? Because whenever I get a chance, whoever I meet, I say, I'm a phone call away, call me anytime. What can I do for you? You doing okay? Small things. How did Prophet used to do, right? Prophet would, in the congregation would say, are you doing okay? How is the family? How are the kids? General, so start big and then you can narrow it down. So just assurance. I mean, I feel that even when we come for the namaz, are we feeling connected to each other? If we see how we pray namaz, it's not how Prophet would pray namaz, right? What we do is we are rushing, like, oh, we have to get back to work or kids or family or something. So we come in and we are like going through and just running out. The idea of the congregation was meeting before and after. Even when you are leaving, just checking, hey, you doing okay? Hey, how are your kids? Haven't seen you for a while. You look nice. You look tired. Is everything okay? Whatever icebreaker you can use. Showing interest. Also, one thing which I'm learning is they start to feel invisible. People suffering from depression, they feel invisible, invalidated and invisible. So sometimes just without words, I would go and hug people and say, hey, you okay? That means that I see you. It's very important. That connection, human connection is important. Interest. Are we showing interest? Are we investing in our people around us? That I think is the key. That I think you, alhamdulillah, Brother Tassim, already are seen as a safe space in the community. I'm sure you, Imam, get inundated with these calls because people see you have established yourself. But maybe we need to create youth allies or kind of people who are trained in mental health that can be that support for the community. That's why we could still arrange for a mental health training for an everyday person, how to be an ally. There's whole trainings available. We could do that. I mean, there are so many resources that I can bring to the community if I only see the interest. I mean, right now it's like I have to really still, in 15 years, I'm running after each and everyone to have this conversation. Yeah? So here is our youth leaders here. We can do more trainings and we can be there for others then. We can get certification, we can have identified people because you have to understand this is the biggest privilege somebody can give to you is sharing their internal issues and how to maintain their privacy, honor what they are going through, what words to use, what language to use. There's a whole training around it that we can do. But simple rule. If you were suffering or you were struggling with something that is already making you feel ashamed or guilty, what would you like to hear? What word do you want to hear? You're right? Something supportive. How would you feel if I come and say, I told you so. You were so stupid to act like that. Why would you do that? I mean, right? Unfortunately, that's the wordings that we think we are trying to help, but it's about our needs. These words are what we feel anxious as parents or as community people, we feel anxious, so we are throwing that anxiety over the person. Share a word. What would you like to hear? If you are struggling with something, what would you want? What's the word you would like to hear? How can I help? Okay, what would you like to hear? I hear you. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm here to listen to you. Listening ear. Everything is gonna be okay. Assurance. Tell me what's going on. Yeah, okay, good. Assurance and validation. So really, it's such instinctive human nature. If we only put ourselves in their shoes before judging anyone, and I tell you, the biggest crime we do as human beings is judging others. What's the biggest sin? That even if you are praying 5 times, if you, in your arrogance, are judging someone, that's a big sin, right? I say that God kept day of judgment in His hand. If it was designated to us, they would, we would have done. We would be done by now. So, Alhamdulillah, remembering that. Again, simple thing, not what is wrong with you, what wrong happened to you. Simple thing. And the understanding, the compassion that you want your parents to show to you, first extend that to them and understand they are coming from a different culture, different time. The language of love is very different. I mean, really, the parents, the language of love was ek thappad marungi, was language of love for the longest. We had to learn not to do that, right? We had to learn with our kids that you don't say, oh, I'm going to slap you, and that's the ultimate act of love, right? So we had to relearn, right? So you have to help them relearn. Give them the language, give them the words, share with them how your experience of being a son, being a Muslim, being a student is different. Honestly, if I had not worked at MSU, I wouldn't know how difficult it is for an average student to show up and do that degree, 4 years of undergrad college. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. How do they this? So the biggest vulnerability is exposure to violence, right? Violence could be from parents, from siblings, but spouse, intimate partner violence is real. It's a big issue in the community that we don't talk about. And we know that exposure to that violence does put you on a high risk of you becoming violent, or you going to a substance abuse, or going towards some other behaviors. But the thing is, what I've learned, the model that you have learned with your parents, that's extended. That's extended to your relationship. So yes, absolutely. If we can do that, but I think important pieces, like I feel there was a gap in these community conversations at the Islamic Center. But don't put me next to Imam Chaudhry doing a, there's no way I can win with that. So maybe we can find a good time to have these conversations. So thank you so much. Thank you.